Hey guys, we're here to talk about Sparta. So, Sparta was this great, fearsome, warring military city state, one of the Greek city states. And all the other city states looked at them like kind of like they admired them because they were so cool and powerful, but also kind of scary. They were kind of scared of them because they were so powerful. So Sparta was right in the center of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. I'm going to show you where that is. Okay, so here's where we are. We are over here. And this is actually, this is our school. This is us right here. And then we come over here to Europe. This is the Balkan Peninsula, this whole thing. Here's Greece. And then we have to zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Here we are, this part down here. This is the Peloponnesian Peninsula. And right in the center of it is where Sparta was. Here's Athens. Athens is over here. Sparta was here in the center of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. All right, let's go back to my whiteboard. Uh-oh, where's my whiteboard? Here it is. Okay. I'm gonna erase that. P-E-L-O, Peloponnesian Peninsula. Peloponnesian Peninsula. All right. Sparta had two kings, and anytime they fought, one of them went into battle. But the real governing body of Sparta was their council, called council. And the council was made up of 28 men over the age of 60. Why do you think that is? Let's think about that for a minute. Well, average lifespan back then was much younger. And so if someone actually lived to be 60 years old, they probably knew a whole lot about life. These people were to be respected. Your elders were respected. So 28 men over the age of 60 formed a council, and that council is really what ran Sparta. Now, there was an assembly, you know, like the Athenians had an assembly. They had an assembly in Sparta, but anything the assembly said they wanted to do, the council had to approve it. There was one really cool position that were, here we are, ephors. There were 5 ephors. They were members of the assembly, and these guys, it was their job to make sure the government ran properly. And if an ephor saw a king break the law, the ephor could tell the king, "You're not our king anymore." This was a very, very powerful position in Spartan society. They were responsible to make sure the government was working properly. Like if the council was, I don't know, if all 28 of these men decided to go get drunk every day instead of run their city-state, then the ephors could punish them in some way. Tell them, get with it. Come on, guys. It was the ephors that made sure everything was running properly. So Sparta, they wanted all the Spartans really wanted to do was be a military. That's what they wanted. They wanted to fight, and they wanted to gain land, and they wanted to take over other places. But these pesky things like, we have to eat, got in the way. And back then, how did you eat? If you wanted to eat, you had to grow food. So if you're farming, there's not really enough time to also be in an army. So what did they do? They conquered a neighboring city-state named Messenia. They conquered the entire city-state, and they turned a bunch of them into slaves. And their slaves, they didn't actually use this word slave. They called them helots. So a helot is a slave, but I'm going to scratch this out because they didn't use the word slave. They called them helots. And helots didn't belong to one individual Spartan person. Helots belonged to Sparta. So it was like the city-state of Sparta owned these helots, and the helots were treated very, very badly. And they made them grow all their food and raise their livestock. So now the men of Sparta, they don't have to farm anymore. They don't have to raise animals anymore. They've got people that do that for them. They've got free time. And they spent their free time training up a big, strong, powerful military. Now, if you'll remember, I talked about free time in Athens because Athenians had lots of slaves. And in Athens, they used their free time to go to school and think and sit around and talk about philosophy with their friends. While in Sparta, they used their free time to become strong, powerful soldiers. And let's see, in the 400s BCE, so you guys know I like to draw my timeline. If we're over here, and here's the opposite, so about 4,000 years ago, let's see, if this is 0 and this is 2,000, then this is going to be about 1,000. So this would be about 500. So 400, 300, 200, 100. Okay, so this is about 400. Sorry, that's not very clear. 400 BCE. Right here, the helots revolted. They rose up against their leaders and said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not your slaves. Well, it didn't work, and the Spartans squashed them. But there were so many more helots than there actually were Spartans. So like, I don't know what the real numbers are. You don't even have to write this down. I'm making it up. But let's say for every one Spartan man, there were 25 helots. This is probably pretty realistic. It was probably about 1 to 25. But for every one Spartan who's the boss, there were 25 slaves. These people could revolt. They should be able to win. The reason they couldn't win was because the Spartans were so powerful. But the Spartans then lived in this constant fear of a helot revolt. They always were afraid that the helots were going to revolt again. And so what they did was every year, the ephors, who were the ephors again? Right, the ephors were the 5 people from the assembly that made sure the government ran properly. Every year, the ephors of Sparta declared war on the Helots. And if you're at war, it's totally okay to kill your enemy, which means a Spartan man could kill a Helot anytime he felt like it. Now, they don't necessarily want to kill them all the time because the Helots are the ones that grow their food. But if the Helots lived in that constant fear of, I better do my job or this guy's gonna kill me, it kept the Helots farming and it kept the Spartans not afraid of an uprising. And the Spartans lived a very strict, very disciplined lifestyle. Everything, your mom was strict, your dad was strict, your teachers at military school were strict. Everybody was strict, strict, strict. At the age of 7 years old, all little boys were taken away from their home and put in the military. And it was strict. Their room, which is called barracks, and this is still a word we use today for military housing. It was very simple. It was just a plain, simple room with an uncomfortable bed in it, and that's all it was. So little boys taken away and trained into being really good soldiers. Their education was exercise, hunting, and how to use weapons. And they were always to obey orders. If that coach says jump, you jump. They always have to exactly listen to authority. Everyone's strict with severe punishment if you mess up, and you always have to do exactly what you're told. At the age of 18, after they've been in this military training from the age of 7, now they're 18, they must serve in the military. And they get specific training that's geared for the military. And this lasts 2 years. 2 years of military training to turn them into the best soldiers on earth. Strong, fearsome soldiers. After this, they had to take a test. They took a test to join the Men's Club of Soldiers. And if they passed this test, they became what was known as an equal. And if they were an equal, then they had this great status in society. They got a piece of land given to them by Sparta that was worked, farmed, everything by the Helots. And they were just, one of the regular high-class people. If they failed, it was really bad. If they failed this test, they became an outcast. They were never going to get a job. They were never going to have any friends. Probably no one, no woman was ever going to marry an outcast. They were like the lowest of the lowest of the low of society. Well, maybe a little bit above Helots, and that was it. Women, they were called inferiors. Inferior means less than you. So if they won, they became an equal. If they lost, they became an inferior. Women in Sparta were given a little more freedom than they were in Athens and other city-states, because the men were just never around. Men were never around because at 7, they were taken away to be in this school. At 18, they had to do their 2 years of military service. Well, if you've spent your whole life just around men, then you just kind of want to be around other men. And men all the way through their 30s pretty much only hung out with other men. And so women were left on their own. Women had to run the city, and women were expected to make good, strong Spartan babies. So women were not only allowed to play sports, they were encouraged to play sports, because the Spartans believed that a good, strong, healthy woman would create a good, strong, healthy child. And that was the only thing that Spartan women were expected to do was make good, strong Spartan soldiers. So just a little bit more about the differences in Athens and Sparta. So Sparta, everything was strict. You had to do exactly what you're told. No imagination. Military strength. Athens, they weren't so strict. They were more free. You could think creatively. They encouraged you to be creative in your mind and come up with new ways to do things. And so lots of imagination. And their military was the Navy. The military in Sparta was on the ground. So they had foot soldiers and they had horses. But Athens' real strength was their Navy. That's all the ships. And Athens, because they encouraged creative thinking, Athens was always changing. It was always progressing. People would come up with this great idea and be like, hey, why don't we try something this way? And so they would. But Sparta just stayed the same all the time. So always changing. And Sparta was always the same. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Bye, guys.